Thank you, Taoiseach. You mentioned detail towards the end of your speech. I just wanted to turn the topic to an issue that's obviously important here in Tipperary. You're not very far from Roscrea, where people lost a hotel, where your government took it over and accommodated migrants. In the south of the county, you've got Clonmel, the Greenfield site there, where there are 1,000 people going in. I note your solution in the manifesto appears to be somebody who's a cynic might sum it up as hiring more administrators to solve the problem and process matters faster. This morning, the Sunday Times in the UK reports that your colleague in the UK, Keir Starmer, is looking at exploring offshore processing with other countries. Kurdistan, I think, was one of them. Obviously, Giorgia Meloni is doing that in Italy. The Danes are looking at a similar plan. Aren't people entitled to ask you two questions? First of all, if you mention details, can you tell them exactly how many people you expect this country to accommodate over the next 5 years and where those people are going to go? And secondly, can you address the question of when are you going to be following what Keir Starmer is doing in the UK, what Giorgia Meloni is doing in Italy, and actually reducing some of the pressure on these communities?
Yeah, so thanks very much, John. Well, the first thing I'd say is this. I'd say to the people of Roscrea, and I'd say to people in communities right across Ireland, that this government, the government that I'm a part of, has been responding to migration in a manner that can only be described as an emergency. So people don't want a history lesson, but very briefly, 3,500 people a year, roughly speaking, seeking international protection. Number likely to be 25,000 this year, in that kind of ballpark number. Plus the war in Ukraine saw 106,000 people over a period of time come to Ireland. This is probably the first general election in which any leader gets asked about migration, right? That's the level of change we've seen, and that's a good thing, but I'm just in terms of it being discussed. So we are working in real time to build the system, to make sure that we have a robust, fair, firm migration system. We have an open mind in relation to those issues around processing, but we're going to do it through the EU Migration and Asylum Pact. And at the last formal meeting that I attended at the European Council, I was at an informal one last week, but at the last formal one in Budapest, in advance of that meeting, President Ursula von der Leyen circulated a very comprehensive letter to heads of government and heads of state, which outlined a number of areas that the European Commission now intends to look at as part of that pact, including that issue of processing outside of the European Union. It has to be done in a way, though, if it is done at all, that is fully compliant with European values, fully compliant with human rights, and fully compliant with international law. So it's my position, I think it's also the position of the government that I lead, the three-party government, that we should keep an open mind in relation to this. I have to be honest with you, and I'd never call you a cynic, but I have to be honest with you that I think it might be slightly flippant, if you don't mind me saying so, to suggest the solution is hiring more administrators. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced that one of the ways you actually have a coherent migration policy is by ensuring that people get an answer yay or nay much more quickly. And if it's a yay, they're integrated, they work, they make a contribution to our society and our country, and that is a good thing. And if it's a nay, we then put in place the structures for them to leave the country. And that's you describe it as administrators. That's what I describe as building proper processing structures as well. There is a real debate going on, and I read some of your own articles in this. I mean, there is a real debate going on as to whether Ireland should or shouldn't have opted into the EU Migration and Asylum Pact. I am absolutely of the view that the only way forward is for Ireland to have opted into the EU Migration and Asylum Pact. It is going to place, in a good way, significant pressure on governments, including our own, to meet very, very ambitious times around processing, and those times are going to be legally binding. What I say to the people of Roscrea is this, and I say it to them directly, and I say it to them when I'm out and about around Tipperary. We want to move to a situation where no government's having to come and say, we need that hotel or we need that community centre. And you do that in two ways. You do it by developing on public lands, public facilities, but you also do it by not just having the only conversation about migration being about accommodation. And that's why under our plans, we're restructuring how migration will be managed across government. I don't like this idea of accommodation and integration being over here and migration policy being over there. I think it's a mistake. It may not have been a mistake at the time, but the context has changed. And so we need to bring back migration policy, all parts of it, into one department, and that's what we're going to do as well.